back after the events of the Super Bowl. We're here to break things down, going over the worst top five, best top five cap space scenarios in the NFL. We'll go over the free agents later. We'll go over the NBA All Star game, face of the league, and everything else here. But worst and best top five cap space scenarios in the NFL to start off the offseason. But first, I say a good how do to my co host, Mr. Marcus.
Yeah, here. I'm excited to start the off season. It feels like the Super Bowl was so long ago. I don't know about you, but it just feels like it happened like a month ago. I don't know if it's for me. This weekend felt so long. I like went to Bucky's. I got food poisoning, and then I was gone like from Friday night. We drove to Dallas, and then we got back on Monday. It felt like I was gone for 2 weeks, man. I like got back and was completely out of it at work yesterday, but maybe it's just that awful Bucky sandwich. I don't know.
I'll tell you what, the first weekend without football, it's like this certain level of dread that you realize it's kind of like the first week of snow in like the wintertime. Like you just know that the next few months are going to really suck. Now, it could be worse. We could live in Detroit and also have no football. Um, did you see that that Detroit was literally like frozen? Like the cars were frozen on the street after they had like a shit ton of snow, a shit ton of rain. I think they flooded, if I'm not mistaken. And then it was like -10 the next day, and the cars were literally frozen to the sidewalk. Like they couldn't even open the doors; it was just frozen shut. You see that?
Yeah, no, it was crazy. I saw that on X, and like, I love going into the comments for posts like those because there's a bunch of posts like, "This is what happens when you turn your back on the Lord." More of this is coming. Like this is
Biblical.
not natural. And then it's like you have your first week without football, then your city gets flooded, and then your cars are frozen. At first, when I saw the image, I'm like, that looks fake. It looked AI generated. I'm like, this looks like something out of a Batman movie. Then you're telling me you walk out of your car to go to work and like, oh wait, my car's frozen. Sorry, I can't get to work today. Like, what are we talking about here in Detroit? Like, what is going on where you can live somewhere in America where the street can flood and your car gets frozen and we want Canada, which is farther north than that? I don't think I want Canada anymore after seeing that.
No, I want Mexico. I'll tell you what. I have lived in a warm state now for about 5 months now, and you've been pretty much the same. I don't have any regrets moving to a warm climate at all. No regrets. When I see, like, back home, we got buried with 2 feet of snow back in my hometown. And I don't miss it. Don't miss the cold. I don't miss cleaning off my car. I don't scraping the ice off of my window. I don't miss anything when it comes to the cold. So, anybody listening that is in the cold, here is my call for action: move. Just move out of your state. Here's some states that I'd recommend potentially: Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. Just leave in the summertime. It's hot as fuck. Texas is great. We have Florida. We have fucking North Carolina. We have California if you can afford it. New Mexico if you hate yourself. There's plenty of options where you can just leave and just not deal with the cold. Because you know what we did when I got to my car this morning? I turned the key and I started the car and I drove. You know what you did? You cleared off snow and ice and shit and dirt and fucking like rocks and shit. No. Where you guys are living right now, for those in the cold weather, you're living in hell.
You're also
That has frozen
depreciating your
over.
car as well
Yeah.
because you live in a snowy climate. Like, oh, the rust. Like you live in a atmosphere and an environment where you're like, let me accelerate the rate my asset depreciates, which is most of people's number one asset is a house if you have one, but most people, all the number one asset they have to their name is a car. Most people don't have stocks, they don't have like any sort of crypto or property. Everyone rents now, and then when all these houses get wiped out, it's all apartments. Like all you own is your car, and it can just get frozen by a lake.
Not only that, have you tried driving on ice before? Cars weren't built to drive on ice, Marcus. So
No.
you drive on the road, you have to brake quickly. Your car doesn't know what the fuck to do. It'll go left, it'll go right. Sometimes it'll go in a circle if you're lucky enough. Driving, you would think that the fact that cars have existed for, I don't know, 100 fucking years, that they would figure out a way that you could drive on ice, especially in those colder climates, which seem to take up like half of the country. But no, it's a fucking ice rink, and good luck driving around on the ice because you just can't. Your car doesn't know how to do it because it was never built to do it.
No, we'll make snow tires, which are bigger tires and more expensive than regular ones. It's a scam. Like you make all seasons tires when you really shouldn't be driving in the snow anyways. People like in Texas, it was gonna snow one time. They're like, you know how to drive in the snow, right? It's like, yeah, I know how to drive in the snow, but I know everyone in Texas doesn't respect it and they don't know how to drive in the snow. So like, no, I'm not safe to drive in it because you'll just have all these guys in their trucks like, yeah, we're gonna go drifting in the snow. It's like, okay, yeah, you've never driven in it before. And I used to shovel too at one point in high school, like in between high school and college. And you have to drive to work in a snowstorm. And I just tapped the brakes and my car went all the way around and just gently went into a snowbank. It's like driving in the snow is no joke. And you wake up and your car is frozen. Like, this literally looked like a trailer for the next Batman movie. It's like, is this the trailer for the Batman 2? And you choose to live there in Detroit? Like, I'm sorry, you have to.
Not only that, but they are potentially in sports hell. I mean, Detroit's been like the Lions have been great the last couple of years, but the Pistons were one of the worst teams of all time last year. Then we have the Red Wings, who haven't been good in 10 years, and then who else do we have that I'm forgetting?
Are
Pistons.
the
I don't
Tigers
even know
good
if
right now?
they have the Tigers. Yeah, and the Tigers were good last year, but historically they've been pretty bad post 2013. So Detroit is just it's already hell frozen over, and it's evidence with that there as well. Luckily for them, the Lions cap space isn't looking so bad as we pivot to NFL offseason because the NFL never stops. You know that. I know that. So I figure we have our worst top fives, our best top fives. How about we talk about worst and best top five cap space according to the Brickyard? Should we just go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like trade off 5 by 5, 4 by 4? We'll just go all the way
Uh,
through.
why don't we start out negative? Why don't we get the bad out of the way? Because you're usually someone who's positive, and we want to go into the off season with optimism and lead into optimism here. So let's go over the five worst cap situations in the NFL right now.
Okay, well, let's start it at number 5. A team that last year went all in on a new quarterback, giving him a nice, fresh $180 million deal, and then drafting a quarterback with the eighth overall pick. And what they'll ultimately have to decide is whether or not they want to bring back Mr. Kirko Cousins himself, Hall of Famer Kirk Cousins, dare I say. At number 5, the Falcons with negative $5 million and $3 million in dead cap, which is bound to go up when they have to inevitably either trade, cut, or restructure Kirk Cousins' deal of that 800 or 180 million. If they cut him after June 1st, that is a 40 million dead cap money hit. If it's pre June 1st, it'll be a $65 million dead cap hit with negative $25 million cap savings. So they're pretty much just screwed. The only way to salvage this is if they trade him to another team where they'll pick up 27.5 million. They're screwed.
Yeah, no, Atlanta's screwed.
They're screwed. At number 4, how about the Legion of Doom? That's right, the Seattle Seahawks. Their cap space, they are negative $6.4 million in the cap, with the biggest number being on Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett, respectively. If they cut DK Metcalf, or I'm sorry, if they cut Geno Smith by the end of June 1st, they'll save 31 million in cap. There are some ways they can maneuver here. Maybe they restructure DK Metcalf's deal, but ultimately the Seahawks are screwed. There's a lot of decisions they have to make. Maybe Tyler Lockett finally retires because it feels like he's 804. So at number 4 here. Speaking of frozen hell, how about Buffalo, New York? Last year we talked about how screwed they were. Well, not only are they buried in snow, but they're also buried in dead cap money. So they're number 3. They have $10 million in dead cap, but they have 11 million in dead cap money as well. Notable people that they have for massive cap hits. How about Josh Allen's 44 million? Obviously, that is worth it to some. Von Miller. Will they cut Von Miller? Will they not? If they cut him after June 1st, they'll save $18 million potentially. But just like what happened last year, they had to get rid of pretty much their entire team. They might have to do the same this year. They're basically screwed. At number 2, if it somehow gets worse than Buffalo, how about Cleveland, Ohio? Cleveland has negative 24 million and $51 million in dead cap money, which is by far the worst in the NFL because they're paying a rapist a $72 million cap hit. If they cut him before June 1st, it'll be a $172 million dead cap hit. If they do it after, it's only $118 million dead cap hit. Maybe that's what they do, but Cleveland's screwed. But nobody is as screwed as the perpetual number one worst cap situation in the NFL, none other than the New Orleans Saints. $48 million in dead cap money. They have to make a decision on Derek Carr, on Cam Jordan, on the late, great Taysom Hill. What will they do? We don't know. All we know is that they are $47 million in dead cap money. We don't know even who they'll get rid of. Will they keep Derek Carr? Will they not? Chances are they're probably going to cut him and just take the $30 million cap hit. But we don't know. Ultimately, worst top five, worst cap situation, none other than the New Orleans Saints.
Every year too. It's like they keep pushing off their debt year in and year out, and it's like the New Orleans Saints are Walter White. He's like, well, I might as well cook now because I'm gonna end up dying later. But the problem is the New Orleans Saints don't have cancer, so at some point you're gonna have to face up to this massive problem that you've created with this negative cap situation where you have year in and year out you're always in the bottom five as far as cap. It's like we haven't moved on from the Drew Brees era. We haven't moved on from that team that almost got to the Super Bowl, but there was a pass interference call that wasn't called. Like we're still dwelling on that roster and the old regime, and now we are bringing in Kellen Moore to be our head coach of the New Orleans Saints. Who I don't know. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but I think it's a bad idea.
I think the problem with them is that Kellen Moore might be a fine head coach, but the problem with the Saints is that they don't have a great quarterback. Alvin Kamara's old. The receivers aren't great. We like Chris Olave, but everybody else outside of 4 games with MVS, not impressive. And then their defense is just slowly falling apart. Like Cam Jordan's like what, 34 now? Like I remember Cam Jordan from my childhood, and he's still playing for the Saints. So like the Saints, they've had the same GM since 2001. Their head coaching situation, they're probably going to give Kellen Moore 4 or 5 years to figure out their situation. But the problem is, what are they doing? What's their direction? Are they going to take a quarterback? Are they going to move on from Derek Carr? Are they going to move on from the former Saints and just rebrand? No, they won't. They're just going to stay the same.
Yeah, no, they're gonna stay the same, but we'll see. It's like the same ownership in every situation. Then for the Bills, was last year the first year that Josh Allen's contract kicked in, or is this year gonna be the first year where they're paying him? Because honestly, for him, when you say 44 million, it kind of feels like a discount with what some of these quarterbacks are getting paid. Like if Dak is getting 60, 44 million for Josh Allen's like, oh my god. Josh Allen seems like he's getting paid dirt cheap right now for what he does for the Buffalo Bills. And this is someone labeled a Josh Allen hater because I just predict every outcome of the Bills correctly. But 44 million for Josh Allen, I would take that.
Yeah, it's 14 million base salary, and then they can restructure the deal if they want to. If they restructure his deal, it'll free up 11 million in cap. So I think Josh Allen. I mean, the fact that his cap number is 44 million, I feel like that's really good, honestly. Overall,
Yeah.
I think they're going to keep deferring it out, but good for him, and good for the Bills. Honestly, it sounds like the Bills are just gonna probably cut Von Miller. If I had to guess early on what they'll do, Von Miller seems like the easiest sacrificial lamb, especially because there's no guaranteed money for him.
Yeah, and he's older too. I mean, him and Matt Milano were good, but like I thought Von Miller was too old if you wanted to be a serious contender with this team when they signed him. And I thought that's kind of why you're in the situation to begin with. So you might as well cut him, let him go get a bag somewhere like Houston, who just needs to pick up a pass rusher for the sake of picking up a pass rusher. He'll go to like somewhere like Houston, Tampa Bay, Baltimore, Kansas City, someone who's contending that he can grip to. Maybe the Chargers want to bring him back.
Yeah, I just think that the Bills, it's not nearly as bad as last year. I think last year they had like $80 million in dead cap, but this year they're not doing too bad. They moved on from some of their players. It's just who will they have to move on from? And it sounds like Von Miller is going to be that guy, or maybe Matt Milano as well.
Yeah. And then those are kind of the bottom teams, and then you work your way up from there. There's only two other teams with a negative cap situation. One being the Cowboys. Obviously, the Cowboys are going to have a negative cap situation there. They're at $2,380,470. Yeah, got the whole number there. And then the Miami Dolphins have $7,678,641 in negative cap as well. For Miami, who's a team that seemed pretty hollow last year as far as a roster. And then suddenly you're going to have to whip up a new roster. Like, honestly, we can point to the Falcons, but they have Michael Penix, so that's fine. Like, as far as he develops, it's really going to ride on him. Buffalo will figure it out. Cleveland and New Orleans are hopeless, and they should be that way. Seattle is just Seattle. They'll be mediocre. But, like, Miami, this is like a death nail to Mike McDaniels this season because now we have to build through the draft, which, like, they've been fine at drafting, but, like, I just think this team is, like, over with and two, his contract doesn't even kick in till next year, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't see it kicking in. But what's interesting for them is like you had Tyreek Hill who requested a trade essentially like as soon as the season was over. Will they keep Tyreek Hill? If Tyreek Hill's not on the offense, that offense looks way worse. And then are they going to keep Bradley Chubb? Are they going to keep Teron Armstead? Are they going to keep Jalen Ramsey? The problem is that like a majority of their cap is taken up by five players, and that's why they're so top heavy, and that's why they're honestly just not very good right now. So they have
And
big
do you just
decisions to
have to
make
move
there.
on from that and say, hey, Ramsey and Terrell Armstead, maybe they're too old. Maybe it's time we move on from Tyreek Hill a year early, where maybe we still can get something for him. Where this year he kind of did show some signs of slippage and not being the same Tyreek Hill. So I feel like if you want to maximize your return for Tyreek Hill when you know he probably only has 2 or 3 more years left, I think now is the time to trade him.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can get a boatload for him, just like you gave up a boatload to get him. But this has been a failed experience. As the Chiefs moved on from him, they've won two Super Bowls, almost won a third, and the Dolphins have been perpetual first round exits if they even make the playoffs. So it's time to
Yeah.
just give up.
Yeah, and I could see a team like the Rams going out there and saying, hey, why don't we bring in Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, and Aaron Rodgers and go all in for 1 year?
That's what they do. The Rams are always the go in. If they can get Tyreek Hill with Puka Nakoa, that's a scary team.
And
Especially
Devontae,
with
too,
the
as your three.
Devontae is your three, especially with the Niners falling apart, with the Cardinals just being a perpetual mess, and the Seahawks just kind of going nowhere. That Rams, I feel like that'd be a lock for the division.
But any other bad cap situations that really stand out to you? Or do you feel like everything else is kind of manageable as we go up the list?
I think it's pretty manageable. Like the Texans are behind the Cowboys. They're not quite in the negatives, but they'll free up some cap a number of ways. They'll probably restructure Stephon Diggs' deal. Maybe they'll restructure, say, Daniil Hunter's deal. They should be fine. Chiefs always find a way to manipulate the cap. And then after that, it's like the Bucks and Ravens and teams that are already going all in, anyways. So they're fine. But why don't we have our glass full a little bit? Let's talk about the top five teams cap wise in the NFL to this point.
Yeah, so the top five teams in the NFL cap wise, we have some pretty interesting teams at the top five, and I kind of understand why all of these teams are in the top five because I was a player, I really wouldn't want to play for any of these teams, so it kind of makes sense why they're all in the top five. Because at number five, we have the little brother in LA, the Clippers of the LA football market, some would say, with the Los Angeles Chargers. And if you're a player, you want to go to a contender and a Super Bowl, how can you look at that game from Justin Herbert versus the Houston Texans and say, aha, that's the team that I think I can join and make a difference and get over the hump? I just don't see it happening, but they have $65,645,814 to spend this offseason. So I do think they will be able to get some players, but I feel like the players they might get going to be more mercenary mentality. So let's see if we can get someone in like a T. Higgins and what Jim Harbaugh can do with a little bit of money. Because if Jim Harbaugh can put the team around Justin Herbert, I do think the Chargers will be an interesting team. So I feel like that's a great situation where you made the playoffs and we're kind of just starting to build this thing where we only had Lad McConkey and we can bolster up our offensive line and run game here. So I think Chargers at five, That's really interesting. And then a team who could free up even more cap space. How? By trading away Kyler Murray. That's right. You have the Arizona Cardinals with 71,316,440 dollars. Imagine the cap space you would have if you traded Kyler, tanked for a year. You could have a great rebuild in Arizona, actually. And I feel like you should have just started over with the new head coach with that in mind this year and seen if you could trade up in the draft for Kyler Murray. But at number 4, we have the Cardinals. Interesting situation in the desert. Hopefully, they're able to rebuild. And then we have at number 3, everyone's new favorite team. This is the team that's going to the Super Bowl next year. This is the team that is going to come out and dominate, even though the Super Bowl winner is in their division. But if we know one thing about the NFC East, the same team does not win the division back to back years, and the Commanders have $79,510,623 and a cup of coffee to spend in the NFL offseason this year. And you have a team that went out there, brought in Bobby Wagner, brought in Austin Eckler, and kind of got the most out of them this year. But they brought in a lot of veterans, and they need to get younger. So I feel like you'll have a lot of guys who want to play with Jaden Daniels. And you had a great draft this year building this team. I feel like them being at number 3 is probably the most interesting team with money to spend, because at number 2, we have the Raiders. And with the Raiders, there's still a situation where their owner is kind of cheap. Will they spend all of their cap space? And is Tom Brady going to be a great NFL minority owner and executive? Or is he going to be a Michael Jordan NFL owner and executive? So let's see if the Raiders can put that money to work. Uh, Buy some good talent on that team. I feel like you can, but it's all going to depend how the draft goes for them this year. And you have to go out there and get a quarterback and the right head coach. So I don't know. You still have Pete Carroll. Do you really trust Pete Carroll spending $95 million alongside Chip Kelly? I mean, Chip Kelly plays defense for the defense. He's off the field in 7 seconds. I mean, he was literally the one that invented the phrase one pump jump. So we'll see how that goes with the Raiders. And then at number 1, the New England Patriots with a whopping $125,580,793 with 30 million more to spend than the next best team. It went from 79 million to 95 million between the Raiders and Commanders, 71 between the Cardinals and Commanders, and then the Patriots with the whopping 30 more $1 million with Mike Vrabel coming in healthy with a fresh year to step away from football, create a plan on what he wants to do with the Patriots. He's been plotting for this moment, but I don't know. Patriots with 30 more million. The question is, will they spend it?
The question is, why wouldn't they? Like, they have to spend it at this point. I'm looking at their cap hit. The highest cap hit for them is $20 million, and that is
What?
with Michael Awanu. Yeah, and if they want to restructure their deals, they can free up $5 million with Michael Awanu. They can free up $6 million with Kyle Duggar, $7 million with Christian Barmore. Like, there's plenty of opportunities where they can add another 15, $20 million in cap savings as well, which is to me ridiculous. So Patriots, like, go out there and get T Higgins. Go out there and maybe get Devontae if he even wants to go to your team, and just go there. Just get weapons, please, for Drake May. Can we at least see what he can have if he has a good arsenal around it? We'll go over the top free agents in a few minutes here, but uh, just get them some weapons for fuck's sake. Get T Higgins. Go out and get Devontae. Go out and just get talent, and maybe then we'll see the Patriots move. Um, as far as the other teams, the Raiders, they can save a lot of money by trading Max Crosby, cutting Christian Wilkins, and just making their team even worse. And then the Cardinals, you mentioned trading Kyler. If they trade Kyler, they will save $33 million.
Bro.
Just giving up and moving on from Kyler, trading Kyler to maybe a team like the Jets, who are in dire need of quarterback.
You know the crazy thing too about the Raiders, now that you just said they can make their team even worse if they um, cut Christian Wilkins and trade Max Crosby, is Tom Brady could tank this team for Arch Manning, and then he can literally say he owns the Mannings.
Damn, I didn't think of that. That's true. That that would be an arc I'm ready for. I'm ready for that. He owned Peyton Manning. He didn't own Eli Manning. Eli Manning still has his number, but
He's got to
Arch
balance
Manning,
it out.
yeah, I think if you can own at least two Mannings, then that trumps Eli Manning. Unfortunately, the other guys, Cooper wasn't able to play, but owning two Mannings, that could be interesting. The Raiders aren't going anywhere. They're still going to suck, so don't worry, they'll be bad. But could be interesting. Max
That's kind
Crosby on
of
the
like
move.
they're trending in that direction too with the coaches that they hired. Like, do you bring in Pete Carroll to like mentor Arch Manning and then bring in like your real offensive coordinator, head coach, or I don't know.
That's a good question. I feel like I don't trust the Raiders are smart enough to do that. Historically, I mean, you have the Browns, but then a close second's the Raiders with level of like stupidity, dumb moves that they've made historically. So even though Brady's there, I don't know if Brady saves my hesitation with the Raiders. They're the same team that drafted Henry Ruggs and Tyree Wilson and Jamarcus Russell. They're just not very smart. So I can see them fucking this up somehow. Maybe they win
Yeah.
the last game of the season and just ruin their first overall pick. I'm not sure, but they're going to find a way to screw it up.
Yeah, and like the interesting thing is like I feel like with the Cardinals, you mentioned like potentially trading Kyler, but like I feel like this is when I'm confused why some people are in power in the NFL, and it seems like there's a lot of nepotism in the sport one time because I just simply lay out like if you trade Kyler Murray, you're gonna have like $100 million in cap space at this point, have the second most cap in the NFL, and then you fire your coach and you can build an entirely new team. Just say, hey, it didn't work out. Like I feel like this should be the most logical route forward for the Cardinals, right? Like you're not building anything that's going anywhere right now with Rich Gannon.
If we can have Kyler Murray with AJ Green and D Hop and a good running back at the time, and they didn't do anything, they just were top heavy. It just blew away. They started off 7-0. They finished 11-6. Like the Cardinals aren't going to do anything. And Marvin Harrison, will Marvin Harrison be what we think he ends up being? Maybe. But the Cardinals just like their defense, they have a lot of pieces that they still need to fill. Their offense, there's a lot of holes there. And you're paying your quarterback $50 million. Like, I just don't think that they set up their team for success moving forward. When you're already paying your quarterback, a guy who ultimately is like just an average quarterback at best at this point.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think it's logical, but do like the Cardinals actually care about winning? Like as a franchise is the question because a lot of people will be like, "This is smart. This is what you should do going forward," and you have all this cap space, so let's go all in and try and win. Where some teams are actually just trying to spend money and maximize the profits and return they get from their fans. Like it's not about winning for every team. Like at the end of the day, the NFL is a business and it's nice to win, but how much more money do you get from winning versus what you have to spend to get there and the amount of assets you have to give up in the future?
Well, here's a context. You talk about the Cardinals caring about winning. The Bidwells have been a part of the ownership for several decades now. Since 1974, you want to know how many times the Cardinals have made the playoffs?
Three
Nine.
times? Nine?
Nine. Since 1975, they've made the playoffs 9 times. You know what? If we go to 1976, they've made the playoffs 7 times. Keep in mind that 1976 was 50 years ago. They've made the playoffs 7 times. That's absurd. And not only that, I see first round exit, first round exit, first round exit. The only times that they made and won a playoff game was the Super Bowl when they made the Super Bowl and lost to the Steelers in heartbreaking fashion. And other than that, it was the just beating the Packers with either Brett Favre or with Aaron Rodgers. So basically, if they can't beat the Packers, they're not going to win and make a Super
That
Bowl
was a
run.
fluke too when they beat the Packers with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, that was
It was
the
like a Hail Mary to Larry Fitzgerald from Carson Palmer of all people.
yeah, and then the similar game in 2009 with the Packers as well. And then they just got steamrolled. So they just history repeats once a decade, but otherwise, yeah, Cardinals don't care about winning. They've never cared about winning, and that's why they are a horrible franchise, horrible team to root
Yeah, and
for.
then honorable mention too, as we go down this list, similarly to what we did up from the bottom five here early in the episode, we have the Bears at number 6, not too far behind the Chargers here, in a similar situation. New, young, hungry head coach, lot to prove. Definitely wants to spend money, be aggressive here with his draft picks. We have the Bears with $63,909,494 and a Culver's Butterburger to spend.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, they have the talent around them. Is just, can they get the offensive line for Caleb Williams? Can the coaching get it out of Caleb Williams? I feel like they're close. Maybe they get another receiver to replace Keenan Allen, but otherwise, I think with where they are cap space wise, they can still restructure a few deals, restructure DJ Moore and save some money, restructure Montez Sweat. Like the Bears, if they can get a nice receiver, maybe we mentioned like T Higgins or Devontae, if they can get someone like that, Bears are right there. So I think they're in a
Yeah.
good spot.
Do you think the Bears are like the biggest dark horse contender for T. Higgins? A lot of people talk about the Patriots. I don't buy it. The Chargers, I don't really believe in. I think maybe the Broncos, because they have some money to spend and really just need a receiver. But I think like the Bears, if you're a receiver, and the Commanders, just looking at it, like I feel like he's either going to the Commanders or the Bears if he doesn't stay in Cincinnati. I think it's about a 35% chance he stays in Cincinnati. Maybe give it 25% to the Bears, and then you give it like 60% or like 50% to the Commanders.
Yeah. I feel like also this is the type of player that I can see someone like the Steelers maybe going after, complimenting him with George Pickens. They have a lot of cap space. Maybe they succeed. Um, but yeah, I feel like it depends on what he wants. If he wants to win, then the Bengals are probably a good fit. If he wants to be the number one guy, then a team like maybe the Steelers. I think he's better than George Pickens slightly. Um, Maybe it's the Chargers. I think he'd be over Lad McConkey in that case. It depends on what he wants ultimately. I think he wants to be playing with Joe Burrow ultimately. So I think the Bengals are where he's going to stay.
Yes, saying the Steelers right now infuriates me anytime I hear the Steelers because anytime now I think of the Steelers, I think of Arthur Smith opening up his mouth saying, I think Daniel Jones would be a great fit in my system.
He did not say that. Did he
He
say that?
did. Yeah, no, Arthur Smith is considering Daniel Jones as a quarterback who could be good in his system. Like, it made me so angry when I saw it as someone who's a Steelers fan. You talk about a team who's just trying shit after Big Ben. We go after Kenny Pickett. All right, we tried a rookie, it didn't work. Then we try Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, who we know don't work anymore. Now you want to go after Daniel Jones, who has proven he does not work time and time again because you think he can fit in your system. Like, no, if you think Daniel Jones fits in your system, you need a new system, and your system is the problem because there is no system that Daniel Jones fits in. Where he fits is in the UFL, that it's called now, or Canada, or send him to North Korea, but he does not fit in your system, Arthur Smith. And if he does, you need to leave.
I would have to agree with that. I don't know how he fits into anybody's system at this point in the NFL. You know where he fits? He fits really well on the bench, making sure the hand warmers, everyone's warm. Maybe they sit by the heater. Otherwise, Daniel Jones has proven that he is not a good. He's not a starting quarterback, and he's barely a backup. So I would agree. Arthur Smith, we should check him, drug test him. Maybe there's some crack in his system. Maybe he's had one too many nose beers. Somebody investigate.
Yeah. But I mean, they are ninth in cap space. They have 55 million, so they usually do something with it. They got like Patrick Queen last season, but we'll see. And then after Chicago, it's literally the AFC North. We get Minnesota, 61 million. I can't really put my finger on what they should do with that right now because you need a quarterback and you're kind of trying to feel out what you need with JJ McCarthy, but probably looking for a replacement for Aaron Jones and maybe going after an edge rusher like Miles Garrett or TJ Watt if you want to pay them. I could really see Miles Garrett in a Vikings uniform if he stays in the Midwest, and I think that could be a good fit. But what do you think they should do with the 61 million?
What do I think they should do, or what do I want them to do? Because what I want them to do, we talk about the Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers comparison a lot. You could do the funniest thing in the history of sports. I mean, spend a decade and a half with the Packers, fail with the Jets, and then go to Minnesota and make an NFC title game. Tell me that this is not setting up for a poetic finish. And tell me that it doesn't make sense either. I mean, they have JJ McCarthy. He's coming off of an injury. Is he ready to start? Go out there, sign Aaron Rodgers to a 1 year deal, make him the starter, and then eventually, if you want to bench him, you can. But I do this not because I care about the well being of the Vikings. I do this because I care about the well being of the sport and the narratives surrounding it. Do this for the fans because the fans want to see Aaron Rodgers in Minnesota because that would be poetic. Tell me that wouldn't be poetic. That
We
history
do.
repeats twice.
Yeah, we do. It's like Looper, where have you seen Looper with Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, where
Yeah,
like Bruce Willis is I think you watched that for film class, right?
I think so. Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, but it's like the same concept. Like, would the NFL allow it, and would people literally think the NFL is just a script, and then it kind of repeats itself every few years, but in a different version? But some of the things stay the same historically. Where if you have Aaron Rodgers follow the exact same trajectory as Brett Favre. It'd be funny if he like went to the Vikings and was just like a bench quarterback, and then they traded him. They just signed him for a day and then trade him to the Rams.
I would actually just love to see Aaron Rodgers in the Vikings. I feel like nothing completes a Packers arc. And plus, not only that, like with Aaron Rodgers becoming a Vikings and starting for the Vikings, you can guarantee them making the NFC title game next year. You can guarantee him throwing a stupid pick. You can guarantee that Jordan Love will finish his career with the Vikings because everything happens in threes. So, honestly, this is the best thing the Vikings can do. If they want to guarantee a spot in the NFC title game, sign Aaron Rodgers. I would do it
I
now
think
before the text leak from the Jets.
did Brett Favre make the NFC title game with the Vikings?
Yeah, he was in field goal range to kick a field goal and make the Super Bowl, and he threw a horrendous pick to the Saints, and that's what the Saints ultimately made and won the Super Bowl.
That's when they beat the Colts was because Brett Favre was on the Vikings.
Yeah, they could have kicked the field goal to tie it and go to overtime, and he threw a heinous pick. Aaron Rodgers is a smarter quarterback than Brett Favre, but history repeats itself. I can't. I'm not. I'm not going to mess with the genies and wizards that create the NFL script.
Yeah, if I was Jordan Love, I would just go to the Vikings now. Like, can I just play with them? Will they still have Jay Jeff and Jordan Addison? Because like, if Aaron Rodgers goes there, it's like a good team. But the problem is they have a bad offensive line and he's not mobile.
Yeah. Well, they got money to spend. Maybe they can do that. Maybe they can fix it. But that's the arc I want. I don't care. If not, then go to Tennessee or go to the Rams. I don't even know if I want to see him on the Rams either. Like Aaron Rodgers is just if he's not going to the Vikings, then retire. As far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
give the people what they want.
And
And then
then
otherwise, one thing I noticed is that the Steelers only have $45,000 in dead cap, and it's by far the lowest as I look through this here. That is to me bizarre because every other team has at least a million, 10 million, 50 million if you're the Saints, but the Steelers have $45,000 in dead money.
how much do they save if they let go of TJ Watt and trade him?
Let's look. So the Steelers, if they were to cut him, which they wouldn't do, they'd save 21 million. If they trade him after June 1st, they'll save 21 million. So if they trade him, they're going to save 21 million in cap.
Okay, so then you bump yourself up to
80,
that would
80
put
million.
them in the top three as far as cap because if you save 21 million then you have 77 million, so yeah, you'd be the fourth team over the Cardinals if you trade TJ Watt in cap space.
Yeah. Maybe you trade for Kyler, maybe, if you want to. I don't know if I would, but at least you have a
Yeah,
quarterback
include
that's
TJ
better.
Watt in like a trade for a team with the team that has a top draft pick but doesn't need a quarterback. You trade TJ Watt and a couple of draft picks and some of your players like George Pickens you maybe get rid of too, and then go after Cam Ward.
Yeah, they could do that. Yeah, the Steelers, I think the TJ Watt era, they should move on. It's interesting because when we're headlining the offseason preview, like we've talked about the teams with cap spaces, but it seems like last year we had Saquon and Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones and all of these really great running backs. This year, it's setting up that this is going to be the edge rusher offseason, where we have potentially TJ Watt, Miles Garrett on the move, and then there's also like Javon Hargrave who could be available, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa's probably going to get cut by them. So there's a bunch of edge rushers that could be added there. Now,
Max
do you feel like,
Crosby.
yeah, Max Crosby too? Like, based on how the Eagles won the Super Bowl with the Jalen Carters of the world, like, I feel like we're in for a big edge rusher off season.
Yeah, no, I definitely think we could be. And I think it's because of the names, because with Philadelphia, they had a really good defensive line and they could get pressure up the middle, which made it a lot easier for your pass rushing. But we saw what Detroit looked like when they had Aiden Hutchinson last season. And we know getting to the quarterback and getting the quarterback down is the most important thing. And then also, to prevent that, the most important thing was running the football last season, where you have a era of the NFL where it's all about pass, pass, pass. So the defenders have to get faster to keep up with the quarterback and stop them outside the pocket. But in turn, they get smaller, so you can have a big offensive line, beat them up, which is why last season was the season of the running back. So now you have a situation where you need players on the edge who can also stop the run and get to the quarterback here. So I feel like with the players that are going to be available, I mean, Miles Garrett, TJ Watt, potentially Max Crosby, if the Raiders decide to move on from him to free up even more cap space, Javon Hargrave, like potentially Joey Bosa, maybe the 49ers take a look at Nick Bosa and see what's going on with him. Like, it's going to be a lot of really good players available, similar to last season where we had Saquon available, Derrick Henry available, which is kind of like the TJ Watt and Miles Garrett of the edge rushers of this era, where you can consider those two guys the two best players at their position.
Yeah, I agree. And depending on where they go, like selfishly, I'm looking at a team like the Lions. If they can add, I think Max Crosby would be the best fit for them for their identity, but getting a top edge rusher for the Lions would be great. If the Texans really want to bolster up their pass rush, like they already have Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson, maybe they go after a Javon Hargrave or whoever else might be available. Maybe a D tackle would fit well for them. Um,
Yeah.
the Eagles, if they want to be extra scary, they go after Miles Garrett because the Eagles don't have like terrible cap space either. I
They had
believe
21
they're,
million.
yeah, they could still manipulate the cap and still afford to get a Miles Garrett if they want, which would be horrifying. And then like the Rams are always there. Obviously, the Bengals could use it for sure. Max somebody with Trey Hendrickson, but those are just my immediate thoughts as far as like edge rusher wise. Adding a team that already has a good edge rusher and you get Miles Garrett or TJ Watt, like that's just NFL fandom at its max.
Yeah, no, I think that's going to be like the most interesting part of the offseason is where are these major edge rushers going to go and are they going to leave? Like, are the Steelers going to let go of TJ Watt because the Steelers are kind of a traditional team where they kind of let their legends retire there? Like, can you think of a major Steelers legend that retired someone else? Like Troy Polamalu, did he retire someone else? No, he retired with them. Heinz Ward, did he play for another team? No. Ben Roethlisberger retired with them. You look at a lot of their like Hall of Fame players, and they kind of keep them home. So I don't know if TJ Watt's necessarily going to leave, but I would like to see him go to a better situation. And I feel like a sleeper team for him would be the Patriots, where Mike Vrabel is just bringing up a crew. Like Robert Kraft hands him the checkbook and lets him get whoever he wants. Because also someone like I'm blanking on his name, the interior Jeffrey Simmons for
Hmm.
Tennessee. Like someone like him, if Tennessee wants to create even more cap space, he's someone who wants to win. Like I could see Jeffrey Simmons and TJ Watt going to New England, and then you bring in someone like T. Higgins. Like that would be a massive offseason for you, and then you draft a running back and an offensive line.
Yeah, maybe they draft someone like a Cam Scatterbo
Cam's
potentially for the running backs. That could be a good
that
fit
should
for
be a
them.
shirt.
Just throwing somebody out there that could be cool. Yeah, the Patriots have an opportunity to the Dolphins are in disarray, the Jets are in disarray. Bills are the Bills. The Bills will be there. But if the Patriots can get two good receivers, and then they already have a decent pass rush, if they can go out and get a Miles Garrett or TJ Watt or Jeffrey Simmons, I think could complement either of those two well. Then the Patriots might actually be maybe they're not a playoff team, but I think they're right on the cusp. Just like a team like a comparing them maybe like to a Seahawks where they're in the mix, and I think they can definitely make a playoffs um, this upcoming season if they can do that.
No, I definitely think they will make the playoffs next year, especially with their division they're in. The coach that they have with the checkbook, like the jump from year one to year two. Like, I feel like if you get the right talent, and I think Mike Vrabel is the right guy to do it, I definitely feel like the Patriots will be in the playoffs next year if they spend their money because you have a lot of it. And there's like some edge rushers here, but the free agent everyone is talking about is T. Higgins. And I think the funniest part about T. Higgins was who Pro Football Focus compared him to because according to Pro Football Focus, T. Higgins is the number one free agent in the NFL, and they compared him to Kenny Galladay in 2021. Good job, Pro Football Focus.
That makes me so fucking mad. Kenny Galladay, for those who forget, for maybe people new to ball, he was a fine receiver for the Lions during the middle era Detroit Lions team, a team that he was a one-time Pro Bowler. Well, the Giants were really stupid, and they went out and gave him this massive 4-year bag, and in total, he had 18 catches for them, despite making $70 million. Like comparing him again to Kenny Galladay is an insult. With T. Higgins alone, I think already has better numbers than that Kenny Galladay. He hasn't been a Pro Bowler, but he's consistently been 1,000 yard season. This year he was banged up. In 12 games, he had 900 receiving yards. Could have easily surpassed that. That is blasphemy. Pro Football Focus, check yourself, please. This is insulting.
Yeah, and then Pro Football Focus. We say on the show, like when we talk about the Pro Bowl, like who cares about offensive linemen? Well, neither does Pro Football Focus because at number two they have Trey Smith of the Kansas City Chiefs, and his top free agent comparison is NA, not active. So they didn't even bother giving him a free agency comparison. They're like, no, fuck the offensive lineman. If you're an interior guard, we're not going to bother comparing you to a free agent. We're just going to put NA next to your name, even though we have you as the second highest ranked free agent this year.
I feel like it's because the only time you think of offensive lineman signings, at least for me, I only think about Nate Solder because it was a horrible signing. And other than that, it's like whoever the Bengals have signed the last 4 years who haven't panned out. I don't know if offensive lining signings, first of all, they're not sexy. And second of all, it seems like when we rethink about them in hindsight, they usually don't work out, at least in the Bengals and Giants and Patriots favors.
Yeah, I know. Even though, like, I feel like offensive linemen are peak male performance, but I guess that's just me.
Yeah.
But at number two, or at number three, we have Javon Holland. This one's interesting. He's a safety for the Miami Dolphins, and his top free agency comparison for Pro Football Focus is Jesse Bates in 2023. His first 3 out of his 5 years, he was graded as a top five safety at his position. So I feel like if you're a secondary needy team, this is going to be a really interesting signing. So I could definitely see um, a team like Chicago going after him. I could see the Vikings or the Chargers also trying to go after Javon Holland here because Miami doesn't really have the money to pay him. So I
Yeah.
could definitely see him walking and getting in a bag, or it's a situation where they tag him.
Yeah. It doesn't look like the Dolphins are going to tag him, but I think Javon, like, he's super young. He's only 24. He'll be 25 beginning of next month. But if they can get a team like the Lions would be a good fit because they could use some secondary help. Maybe
Washington.
the Washington, they want to open their checkbooks. If the Cowboys can afford him, the Cowboys could definitely use some secondary help. So he's actually, I like the Jesse Bates comparison in this case. I think he actually fits that pretty well, and it's worked
Yeah,
out
I
in
think
Atlanta.
I think he'll be the biggest piece to fall, at least defensively this year. But that's interesting for secondary needy teams. But let's see if Washington goes out there and opens up their checkbook. That'd be interesting. And then at number four, I'm not a huge fan of this receiver, but we have Chris Godwin, and his comparison is Allen Robinson in 2022. Wow, that couldn't be more accurate.
I don't know. I don't think he's that old. Allen Robinson was like 35 when he signed with the Rams. I don't know. Chris Godwin's been banged up, and Chris Godwin's had some issues with dropping, but I think that if someone like the Patriots went after him as like a second tier option, I don't think he'll be bad by any means. I mean, he's still been productive. He's had a number of successful seasons. So I feel like how old is it? Allen Robinson now has got to be like 35. Like he's not. He's like 26 right now. I don't think that seems a little much. Allen Robinson's only 31. Okay, maybe so. I don't know.
Chris Godwin's also been injured too.
Yeah, this past season he was banged up. So when Allen Robinson signed with the Rams,
He's 28. I guess he has some years left. Could you see like the could you see like a team who has top five? Do you think this is a team where if you don't get a top receiver, you have to settle for him? So maybe like he's gonna probably go to Washington, um, LA for the Chargers or the Patriots if they can't get anyone. It's kind of like the consolation receiver where
yeah, I think the Patriots are gonna get Chris Godwin. He makes sense in New England. He just when I see him in a Patriots uniform, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That's where I think he goes. I think even if they go out and get another receiver, Chris Godwin will still complement them. So I think that they'll maybe it's just like a 1 year deal. I think he ends up on the Patriots.
And then at number five, Khalil Mack, edge rusher here. If the Commanders have like the same strategy they did last year, I could definitely see them going after him because they like to take a lot of risks, take a lot of chances, and they can kind of just unleash him, let him go all out in his career. He can kind of just be a rotational player for them that's explosive.
Yeah, I think that's a good fit for him. Maybe the Bears, if they want to bring him back, they could probably benefit from him and his leadership. At this point, he's trying to ring chase. So if I'm him, like you leave the Chargers, maybe the team like a Chiefs come knocking on the door. Maybe I doubt Buffalo can
Steelers.
afford him. Steelers make a lot of sense for Khalil Mack. I think he's going to go to a contender most likely, and I can see. I think Pittsburgh makes sense. I think maybe Detroit would be a good fit for him, although they have fine linebackers already. Somewhere where he can get a ring potentially.
Yeah. And then let's see who they compared him to. It was Von Miller 2022. Yeah, exactly the
Yeah,
same. That's
that's
a
about
good one.
right. Yeah.
And then at number six, DJ Reed, New York Jets. He's currently compared to 2018 Malcolm Butler.
Oh, okay. Um, I like the comparison. I feel like DJ Reed's a decent cornerback, but again, I feel like it's going to be like people are going to be here to address their pass rush potentially. I think Javon Holland's going to ask for a bigger bag, but DJ Reed, he's getting a little bit older. He's going to be 29 this upcoming season, so I think it's going to be like a 2 or 3 year deal. Um, and honestly, like yeah, maybe like a team like the Cowboys, maybe a team like the Commanders potentially want to help their secondary. I don't really know where else
Yeah.
he would really fit in otherwise.
Kansas City maybe needs some depth.
Yeah, he played in
But
Kansas City. He played in Kansas. He played for Kansas State in college, so that could
yeah,
fit.
he has connections there, so it could be interesting. Wait, Kansas State or Kansas City? Because
Kansas
Kansas.
State. He played college at Kansas State.
Okay, yeah, because Kansas City's in Missouri, so
Oh, okay,
it's weird.
whatever. Either way.
But and then at number seven, Amari Cooper from the Buffalo Bills is a free agent, and his comparison is DeAndre Hopkins 2023. Also accurate, I feel like credit where credit is due.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope it doesn't end up like D Hop. I hope he doesn't end up on a terrible team. Amari Cooper's a guy that I can see on the Patriots because they don't want to spend money on T. Higgins or trade for somebody. That's another guy. Um, I don't think he goes back to Buffalo. Um, Other receiver help, the Chargers potentially make some sense there. Maybe Chicago wants to replace Keenan Allen with Amari Cooper, and I think Amari Cooper's a little bit better, a little bit more juice. But where would you see Amari Cooper? I kind of see him going to like Chicago or New England potentially.
Yeah, I could see him going to Chicago or New England. Maybe he goes back to the Raiders if they're just going to pay him a bunch of money and they have a rookie quarterback.
Hmm.
So I could definitely see that, but I don't really have like a strong feeling either way or where he's going to go. I feel like Buffalo can't really afford to pay him because they're negative in the cap this year. So it was always just a 1 year rental for them.
Yeah, and
So
they've
maybe
got
the
their money's worth.
Patriots are a team where if they bring in Chris Godwin, draft a rookie receiver, and then you bring in Amari Cooper, we're just kind of signing receivers on a deal like that could work for Drake May, where he has like a couple different types of receivers.
Yeah, and maybe the rookies that they drafted last year don't suck as much as they did. You get two veteran receivers on small deals, 1 to 2 year deals, then I wouldn't hate that. Especially you give them both of them. I think have enough in the tank that you get some value out of them. Plus, you still have Hunter Henry, so I like that. Maybe they get a Cam Scatabo in the draft. Could work out.
And then after that, you have Ronnie Staley, who's a tackle, and weird, he has a comparison, which is Anthony Costanzo, 2020 free agent. I think he
Riveting.
just stays in Baltimore. Like he's
Yeah.
not going anywhere.
If the Ravens are going to pay him, why would you leave? I got a team that's top 3 or 4 in the league, arguably. I wouldn't go.
Yeah, no, I think he stays, but number nine is the spiciest one here. And I want your take and your feeling about this because I feel like this is going to be a hot topic heading into the offseason, and we're kind of previewing it right now. So, number nine, we have quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, Sam Darnold. And his top free agent comparison is Jay Cutler of 2014. And my question is, what happens with Sam Darnold? Because the Vikings have cap space, so maybe you could afford to pay him on a 2 to 3 year deal where you can get out of it after year two and play JJ McCarthy, and then you don't have to pay him for a little bit, so you can talk yourself into it. But do you think he stays, or do you think someone makes their biggest mistake and sets their franchise back 5 years?
Well, I think about history. I love history. You love history. We love history on this show. What's a team that I can see shooting themselves in the foot, being stupid because they were good enough this year to fuck up their draft position? I see two teams that could do that. Either the Raiders or the Giants. Because the Giants are in an interesting spot where I think they're picking third overall. So Cam Ward and Shador Sanders won't be there. So maybe they just take the next available player. Or the Raiders, who ended up being 4-13. I believe they're picking sixth, if I'm not mistaken. They can go out. Sam Darnold, I mean, I feel like he would fit the Raiders pretty well. They could always go after a quarterback next year, also, or maybe they draft like a third or fourth round guy. Maybe they go after Quinn Ewers potentially. But the Raiders make a lot of sense. Like this is a team that, oh, he had one great season. Let's give him a $200 million bag and set our franchise back for the next 4 years. The Raiders are just one of those organizations that do that historically. And if I go with history, it's the Raiders to me. That's my hottest take.
But if my take from earlier rings true, this would fit in that scenario because you have money you need to spend to meet the requirement here. So if you move on from Wilkins and Max Crosby and you're not paying anyone and you are tanking for Arch Manning, boom. You have the worst offensive coordinator possible, the worst head coach for a long term solution, and you have a quarterback who is going to suck if he doesn't have everything going right for him. You're going to be guaranteed to get Arch Manning next year if he comes into the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I could see Sam Darnold turning back into a pumpkin with the Raiders, quite honestly. Do you think that there's a chance? If I'm Sam Darnold, I never do this, but the Jets need a quarterback. They also were just good enough to be bad, but not bad enough to get a quarterback. Sam Darnold reunion with Mr. Aaron Glenn and the goons they got up in New York. Reunion with the Jets. If I'm seeing ghosts in New York when I play there, I don't know why I would ever go back to New York if I'm Sam Darnold. But money talks, bullshit walks on a motherfucking tightrope. They say the Jets and Sam Darnold with a reunion.
I mean, if Sam Darnold's able to scam anybody into giving him money, he should take it. If anyone's
Yeah,
offering you more than $20 million a year, take it.
I'm just looking at all these teams. Like, who is going to pay him? It's either the Giants, the Raiders, or Jets. We can say that now. We will be the Nostradamus. I think that I'm leaning the Raiders. Maybe the Giants do it, but I
If
think it's going to be the Raiders ultimately.
if you're Dayball though, like, do you put yourself through Sam Darnold when you just went through Daniel Jones? Like, that's like getting dropped. that's like that's like getting lost in the woods because you didn't follow the trail, and then you make your own path, and then you get lost and you spend a week there trying to survive, and then you make it out a month later scarred. You're dealing with some disease you picked up, and you're like, I'm gonna go back into the woods, go off trail again, and do it all over again because I think I can make my own path. Like that's what it would be like if you brought in Sam Darnold instead after getting rid of Daniel Jones last year. Like it's going to be the same thing. And with Sam Darnold, you had Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and Aaron Jones last season, and Cam Akers actually balled out a little bit. Then you also had some other really nice receivers for you, where you picked up a nice third receiver in the draft. Like everything that went right for him and possibly could have gone right for Sam Darnold did last year. And then when the Lions were just like, we're going to blitz every time, he fell apart. So, like, I don't think it's going to work next year. And I don't know if Minnesota's really going to commit, but I think they can afford to pay him for maybe 2 years.
I just don't know if they want to. If they have a quarterback that they want to start, I don't know. That's where I see it falling. A dark horse team for me that I can definitely see going after him, especially if you give their history since Andrew Luck, I can see the Colts. If they don't believe in Anthony Richardson, if they think he's going to ultimately not pan out, the Colts have a situation where I believe they have decent amount of cap space. The Colts, yeah, they always have cap space. They never spend their money. They have 35 million. They can probably free up some more. Sam Darnold with the Colts. He's a guy where that division is still relatively competitive. The Texans haven't quite claimed it as theirs. The Jags suck. The Titans suck. The Colts, if they want to compete for a wild card, maybe they go after Sam Darnold and they pay him 2 years, 100 million, whatever it is. I could see the Colts potentially making a swing if these other teams don't. Because I mean, they signed old Philip Rivers, they signed old Matt Ryan, they signed Nick Foles, they had Gardner Minshew, they've had everybody. They had Sim Ellinger there. Like the Colts, this is an organization that outside of Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck, it's not a great organization historically. And since Andrew Luck, they've been scrambling to find their quarterback. They got AR 50% on their team. He hasn't panned out so far. If they don't want him, then maybe it's Sam Darnold. He showed flashes last year. Maybe he's the prince that is promised.
Yeah, maybe. And I think it'd be fine too, which would be the problem. And then you would have Anthony Richardson and Sam Darnold. So you'd essentially be waving the white flag on Anthony Richardson and telling him, hey, we don't believe in you because we just gave Sam Darnold all of this money. So then you would like create a quarterback battle. So it could work out for you if it lights a fire under Anthony Richardson, but he seems like the type of quarterback that would just ask for a trade.
Yeah, I would agree. And then he goes to the Browns for a 6th round pick.
No. This is like a nightmare scenario. This you're literally putting Pat McAfee in the insane asylum.
Maybe they do a swap for Anthony Richardson to the Browns, DTR to the Colts, and a 6th round pick. The
And you
Colts
sign
get
Darnold. We're gonna let
and
Sam
you sign
Darnold in
Darnold.
DTR. We
We
see
might
what
need
no
to.
one else has seen in DTR.
I want someone to believe in me like the Browns believe in DTR. Can we find that? We don't know.
Yeah. It's like Jameis Winston going around the Super Bowl. Someone hire me. Literally,
Yeah.
you talk about people holding signs in a cardboard box and a cardboard sign. Jameis Winston brought that to life Super Bowl weekend where he's walking around with a cardboard sign asking people for jobs. It happens.
Hey,
People
hey,
think it's fake, but it's real.
grind, recognize grind. I mean, I don't know. The Colts, would I rather them sign Jameis or Sam Darnold? I would go Jameis personally. Because Jameis doesn't threaten Anthony Richardson, but he's good enough that if he sucks, they can just start him and he'll be entertaining for a few weeks.
Yeah, no, honestly, Jameis is a good fit for the Colts, but yeah, that'd be interesting. I feel like that if you don't go after someone like Darnold, go after Anthony Richardson. You could make it work.
Yeah. Yeah, why not?
But then rounding out the top 10 here, we have Josh Sweat for the Philadelphia Eagles. His top free agency comparison is 2013 Paul Kruger.
Nice. I don't know if I even remember that. I don't even know if I remember Paul Kruger. Was that from the Legion of Boom? What the fuck did he play?
His It says his pass rush win rate was 11%. His grade was 81, and his run defense was a 59. So is Josh Sweat.
Hmm.
And then Josh Sweat has a 14.3% win rate compared to Paul Kruger's 11% win rate. But he overall, Paul Kruger had a better grade.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at it. Paul Kruger won the Super Bowl with the Ravens. He went on. Cleveland signed him and then didn't play well. He had one season worth over 10 sacks, but otherwise, he didn't really do anything crazy. Maybe that's a good comparison. You said it's Josh Sweat. I think there's plenty of teams that could use his services, whether it be the Eagles just bringing him back. I mean, they got plenty of people on that line. I think they'd be fine without him, but maybe Washington wants to pair the Sweat brothers together. I could see him going to Washington ultimately, play with Montez. Um, I think anybody that needs a defense, so Detroit would be a good fit. I think the Patriots could use his tenacity as well. Any of those teams, I think, would fit well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe Philly will try and bring him back if we're going to run it back next year because they're really not paying a ton of people. So I feel like Josh Sweat is someone you prioritize paying next year. And then Philadelphia may move on from A.J. Brown. So that'll also free up some cap space for them.
Yeah, and that's interesting. The NFL offseason is fascinating because it feels like it never stops. And unlike with the NBA, there's less drama involved. You just hear rumors, you see people getting cut. It's a lot more cutthroat compared to the NBA, which we had the All Star game this past weekend as well. Everyone bitching and moaning about how terrible it was, justifiably, I would say. Um, Pivoting to the NBA, did you did you watch any of this All Star weekend nonsense and everything that came from that? We had LeBron leaving, like getting cut last minute.
Yeah, well, the funniest part of All Star Weekend was like I didn't. I watched part of one game. So after the concert Sunday night, we're in Dallas, and then we go into this bar. No one's in there, and I get a drink and sit down, and I just see like the All Star game, and I'm like, oh cool, Team Shaq, Team Chuck, and it's like to 40. I'm like, what do they mean to 40 on this? Like, I wasn't following All Star Weekend because for me, I'm like, I just watched the All Star game. I'm not paying attention to see if they made changes, and it's like, oh, they play each game to 40 here. That's weird. And then the next day, I wake up and suddenly it's like, there are way too many ads. Kevin Hart talked too much, and there wasn't a lot of basketball. Mac McClung won again. And then also, LeBron James didn't play. I'm like, wait a minute. LeBron James just decided to protest All Star weekend out of nowhere just to be like, I'm not down with this new format. This was ridiculous. And then LeBron sits out. And like, honestly, I thought it was the funniest thing that could have happened. The fact that LeBron decides to sit out and then comes in there and daps up every single player except for Jalen Brown, kind of just trolling the NBA right now. So I'm like, honestly, this is to me, this is hilarious that he sat out. A lot of people are like, oh, LeBron, how could you disrespect the All Star game? It's like, it's the All Star game. It's like, it's kind of become a joke. And LeBron kind of just sent a message like the All-Star game, like we don't want to do this tournament. We kind of just want to play the game here. So like I'm out. I'm not doing this.
Also, keep in mind, like LeBron, this is his 20th consecutive All Star game. And this All Star format, like it's four teams playing two semifinals games, and it's the best to 40. Like, why? That's a horrible system. I didn't like it. And then, yeah, for LeBron, like, I think it's funny that he did it last minute because I think he said it like a week, like an hour before the game, basically protesting. But for a guy that's made 20 All Star games, a guy that's been the face of the league for a decade and a half, like I don't give a fuck what LeBron does at the All Star game. The All Star game, it's not quite as useless as the Pro Bowl, but it's getting there. It's very close to it. There's some magic still there, but it's dwindling pretty quickly, especially with the 3 point and dunk contest not being what they were. So LeBron doesn't owe the league anything. So I don't blame him for doing that. The games not very enticing. We have a lot of players that had left. Giannis wasn't even playing. Kyrie didn't play. A lot of the stars weren't there. So honestly, I could care less what LeBron does. If he's playing 21 of them. I don't care if he decides to set this one out, even if it is last minute.
Yeah, no, and like he sits it out. I thought it was funny, and people are like, it's kind of just to stay at where the All Star game used to be, and people are like, I remember when the All Star game used to be competitive, and it's like, yeah, it's still just the All Star game. It's kind of like a glorified scrimmage. It's a celebrity game, so you just have a bunch of multimillionaires playing against each other in an All Star game for fun. That really has no meaning. It's like you get some good moments out of it, and the dunk contest though just became like how many dunks can we really think of at this point to make it mind blowing, and then
Yeah.
also the 3 point contest. It's like probably the most interesting one for me because that's like the most interesting competition, and I feel like that can be like competitive each time because like being the best shooter is like a good accomplishment like as far as all-star weekend, but like the dunk contest, it just became generic. That was like the weirdest stuff that they tried, but like messing with the game. It's like we have a formula that works. Just make them play for home court and it'll be competitive at the end of it because teams will care if they win or not.
Yeah, I don't know why they don't do that. That's what baseball used to do. It's been competitive that way, and it's an advantage that, especially if you're someone like maybe it's uh, the Spurs, maybe it's the Thunder. SGA is going to play harder. LeBron's going to play harder. Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown are going to play harder. Donovan Mitchell, like all these teams are going to play harder when they know that they're going to have something to play for because these are all teams that are going for the title more often than not. So I agree with that notion. I don't agree with this semifinal nonsense either. Make it more important because I mean I don't think the All Star game has always been like ultra competitive. Even people glorify the 2010s and the 90s All Star games. It's always been a scrimmage. So if it can have meaning behind it, that's what made the baseball All Star game so great. And that's why I still think that's arguably the best. It's because there was meaning behind it. So add that to it, and I think that would help solve the All Star game at least.
Yeah, because if you're a serious contender and you're Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, like you want to win the All Star game more than anyone else. And then Jason Tatum was the All Star MVP last year, most points scored in the All Star game. So you would really find out who the players think the stars are in the game with who are they going to at the end of the game because it's going to be like a goofy scrimmage at the beginning of it, but they're actually going to try hard a little bit. I don't think anyone's going to get injured, but I do think like at the end of the game they would care, and I think it would be a solution that would work because like sure you can work out our season for your conference, but when it comes to the NBA Finals, it's the East versus the West. So, which conference was better throughout the regular season? We find out in the All Star game.
Yeah. And I feel like part of that kind of changed, especially when the player mobility really took place. Because I felt like the West got pretty stacked back in the day when we had like Chris Paul, James Harden, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Draymond, Clay Thompson. We had all of these players going out west. Kawhi was there for a while.
Paul
And then
George.
in the East, we'd have like LeBron, we'd have Isaiah Thomas, Gordon Hayward, some of these notable guys, DeMar DeRozan. But it felt like for a while, I think the reason why they changed it was just how heavily weighted it was in the West for a while. Um, but I don't know if that's the case anymore. I feel like there's plenty of great players on both sides of it now, with the Celtics, with the Cavs, with the Hawks, with Trey Young. Like there's plenty of talent on both sides now, where I think it would be just fine.
Yeah, no, I think it would be fine. Especially like you have Giannis, Dame, Tatum, Brown, Trey Young, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, all in the East. Joel Embiid, when he's playing, you have him for about half the games, if that, maybe a quarter. You have a quarter of Joel Embiid versus like Anthony Edwards, Jokic. Like it's pretty even. It's pretty evenly matched.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But it makes for an interesting conversation, right? Because everyone's bitching and moaning about LeBron leaving the All Star game last minute, him being the face of the league the last, call it 20 years roughly. And obviously, like LeBron's 40 now, he's transitioning out of the prime of his career. He's looking at retirement probably in the next year or two. Gets us talking about the face of the league. And I know that there's been a number of talking points, especially since the All Star game, arguing who's the next face of the league. We've had Anthony Edwards thrown their hat in there. There's been Jason Tatum. Maybe it's Luka Doncic. Maybe it's Wemby. Face of the league. Like when that conversation opens up, I know you mentioned Greg Jennings had a thing to say about the face of the league, but who do you think will be the face of the league ultimately?
Yeah, so I think the NBA always has like three faces at a given time, like three or four players where you had like LeBron, Kobe, and Tim Duncan. Then it was kind of LeBron, Steph, and Kevin Durant. And you had like Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, you had Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson. So it's always one or two players. So I do think when it comes to the face of the league in the NBA, it's going to come from someone who has a dynasty in the East and the West here. And for looking at just like people who should be the face of the league based on talent, like I just don't understand if the Celtics go back to back this season, why it shouldn't be Jason Tatum when he has more points than LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, and Kevin Durant at age 27 when all three of those players had playoff success early on and at his age, and he has more points than all of them before that age of 27. And then he's made the finals twice now. He has a stacked roster where they have all of his players paid on his team. Like, I just don't understand why he can't be the face of the league, especially because I think they're going to try and pit him against Luka Doncic, and then I think we're also going to have Victor Wembanyama in there as the third guy. So I feel like it's going to be Luka, Tatum, and Victor Wembanyama. I just don't get like them pushing Anthony Edwards down our throat because I feel like Wemby is a more generational talent. Luca has just done more with less than Anthony Edwards, and I think he's just a better player offensively. And then Tatum's just better than Anthony Edwards at everything.
I think Anthony Edwards is kind of like the Vince Carter or the Tracy McGrady, or I guess if you want to throw him in, I don't think he's as good, but Jason like James Harden, where he has a lot of highlights. There's a lot of interesting like highlight reels. You'll see him on Sports Center a lot. But at the end of the day, like he's made one conference finals. He got swept basically by the Mavericks. And I still think that he deserves to be in that conversation because I think he's still like an exciting player. But just like with John Moran and just like with Derrick Rose and all these other guys that have come and gone, I just he needs to prove that he is the face of the league. Because just like with all the guys you mentioned with Kobe and Duncan and LeBron, all of these guys have a shit ton of rings. LeBron obviously four, and then the other guys had five, respectfully. That he needs to at least make a finals. Because with Luca, he's made a finals. Tatum has a title, and then Wemby, I think, is well on his way to doing so, especially with the addition of De'Aaron Fox. So you have to have playoff success in order for you to be there. I think Giannis is a little bit older. He probably doesn't fit there anymore. Same with Joker, but if we're looking at the next generation, like it's got to be people who have already had success. And who has had more success than Jason Tatum? Starting off as a rookie, blocking LeBron, having consistent Eastern Conference Finals appearances, multiple Finals appearances, and then on the path potentially for another ring. Like I think Tatum has to be there. Everybody that you've mentioned, I would probably agree with, especially with Luca and Wemby, given the foreign boom that we've had the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, and I think with Tatum too, the thing that's interesting is you have to look at all these stars and who kind of is just entering their prime right now. And I feel like this season is the first real year of Jason Tatum's prime where he has been effective passing the ball. Defensively, he's leading the league in go ahead game tying or game winning shots this year. And it's him or Tyler Hero, but he's tied for number one as far as makes for winning the game. People try and always argue he's not clutch, and then he has more points, the most points under the age of 27 in the playoffs. So I feel like you have to look at all the other teams, like who has the best chance to win multiple titles over the next few years. And I feel like he's kind of going to end up becoming like a Tim Duncan of this generation, where maybe he's not like doesn't have the big personality. He's kind of quiet. Um, and people think he's boring. And that was what Greg Jennings was saying. Like people watch Jason Tatum and they're like, nothing he does leaps off your screen. And they like everything he does kind of just looks average. Where when you talk about Anthony Edwards, it always looks interesting. Like Jason Tatum dunking on LeBron isn't interesting. That dunk he had versus the Knicks isn't interesting. His game winning shot versus the Pelicans isn't interesting. And then he has Jalen Brown, Drew Holiday, and Derek White, who have all been paid. Like this team is going to be good for another 3 to 5 years, where him and Jalen Brown are just entering their prime. So I feel like he has a chance to win 3 or 4 titles.
Yeah, he absolutely can. I would agree with that. I think it makes an interesting conversation. I like the Tim Duncan comparison because Tim Duncan even though he was one of the best players consistently, he didn't have that big ego that ultimately fuels like being face of the league, like LeBron and Kobe would demand. I think another guy that we can shout out too, I think he's going to fall more into like the James Harden category, is someone like SGA, who he's been a great he's been second in the MVP last year. He was due for an MVP at some point. He might win MVP this year potentially, but that's another team where the Thunder have been good. Um, and they're looking like, they're number one in the West currently. They should be successful the next few years with how young they are. SG, I think, could also be in that conversation for face of the league. I think he's one of those guys that you're going to mention when talking about the biggest stars in the league and who is the face of it. If he wins a title this year, maybe he can show that too.
Yeah, it's interesting because now we're in an era where who's going to be the first guy to win multiple titles of this new generation? Because we have Giannis who's won one, we have Jokic who's won one, and now Tatum has won one. Kind of in the new era of stars right now, and Jokic and Giannis, they're kind of like the middle child. I feel like where J. Cole's always talking about being the middle child of the 2000s and the new era of rap, and I feel like Giannis and Jokic are kind of stuck in the middle there, where Tatum, Luka, Anthony Edwards, Wemby, Devin Booker, who has made it NBA Finals, Trey Young. Like the league is waiting for one of those guys to win multiple titles and then turn into a dynasty. It's like, will we get that era this year, and who's going to fill that vacuum?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Most likely, I think the Celtics are poised for it. I think also with the Lakers, with what they've been able to build, just being able to get Luka, the Lakers have always found a way to get multiple stars. Maybe the Lakers can build that Celtics and Lakers rivalry that we saw in the 80s and the 70s, 60s, 2000s. Like, I think that's what the NBA is pushing towards. Just like we speculate with the NFL, what's going to be best for ratings and what the NFL is going to be pushing for. In the NBA, they're going to be pushing for Lakers Celtics. So I feel like they're poising for Tatum and Doncic as the faces of the league.
Yeah, and it makes sense because the finals last year was interesting because if Luca goes from Dallas and then say Dallas makes the finals maybe in a year, ends up losing to the Celtics, then he ends up coming back and then it becomes like a trilogy with him in LA where it's like, okay, they're 1-1 with him in LA. Who's going to win the third one? I feel like that would be a good matchup. And then also the Warriors are kind of on their last stint with Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry. So it's like, is that actually going to work or is that kind of going to crash and burn?
Yeah, it's interesting to see. Right now, I believe they're in the tournament if the season ended today, but they've been successful so far. I know it's only been a couple of games. We'll see how they go, but it's interesting to see because when I think about like the transition into the new era, historically it's like we had the 80s, it was like the Lakers made it to the finals, faced the new era which was Michael Jordan. They fell. And then to the 90s, the 99, it was the Pacers who were very successful in the 90s. They face the Spurs. The Spurs become the new blood. And then you see that throughout history, like the new blood taking over, essentially. They face head to head. So maybe we're geared towards seeing like a Celtics versus maybe it's the Warriors, maybe it's LeBron and the Lakers or whoever it might be. And then the new blood ultimately wins. That's what I think. If we look at the history of the NBA, that's what usually happens.
Yeah, definitely. And it's usually the older players getting injured too. Like Magic Johnson was injured versus the Lakers. But I'm honestly really excited for the NBA playoffs this year. Specifically, I think the East is kind of locked up right now in my mind. But I think the West is going to be really interesting with Denver seeing if they can rebound from their playoff woes last year. And then is Oklahoma City real? We're about to find out this year because if Oklahoma City goes out there and makes the finals this year, I feel like that'll be a really interesting storyline where you could potentially have a rivalry born between SGA and Boston here, or maybe the Knicks make it and it's New York and Oklahoma City. That could be interesting too. And then
Hmm.
also, will the Spurs be able to sneak in? Is it going to work with Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry? Like, there's a lot of interesting things that are going to happen in the NBA playoffs this year. Especially too,
Yeah.
like Milwaukee, if they just lose in the second round again this year, what are we doing in Milwaukee?
I think if they don't make the conference finals, Dame's gone. Giannis is probably walking at this point. and the Bucks ultimately probably have to rebuild because I believe Giannis's contract is up after this year, and he can demand a trade if he wants to. But I have to double check that. Um, and then there's also
And yeah,
like, oh yeah,
I was gonna say Giannis said when Luka went to the Lakers, he's like, I hope we see all these European players go to all the major franchises. Like, I'd love to see Jokic with the Knicks, and then Wemby's with the Spurs now. So he like kind of hinted at it. So if he's hinting at that, I think he's going to Miami if they traded Jimmy Butler.
that'd be interesting. I wouldn't mind that him in Miami. Um, Also, I think like some other narratives involved in the NBA, like the Suns, right? They have Kevin Durant. They flirted with trading him for Jimmy Butler or trading pairing him with Jimmy Butler. That failed. It seems like that breakup is inevitable too, as they're out of the conference matchups as well. We talk about the Spurs potentially sneaking into the Western Conference. The Kings, what will they do with Zach Levine and the trades they've made? So I feel like, especially with the Warriors and Suns specifically, how will this affect them moving forward? Because if the Warriors don't even make the playoffs, not even the tournament, how will that affect their future with Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry? And then for the Suns, like I think the breakup's inevitable with Kevin Durant ultimately.
Yeah, I think the Warriors, it's simple this year. We were just too far behind by the time we got Jimmy Butler. So we're going to relax, Jimmy, get healthy because he had some injury issues heading into the season already. So we want you fully rested and healthy for next season. Then we're going to go all out in the offseason and get some really good role players, bring some free agents in so we can become a contender. So the Warriors may just have to punt on the Jimmy Butler trade and then see this as a 2 to 3 year window with Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler finishing out their career. And then with the Suns, Kevin Durant going there just never made any sense to begin with. Like everyone I talked to when he got traded to the Suns were like, eh, it's Phoenix. And they're not like the Suns with like Devin Booker. It just didn't seem like a fit that was ever going to win an NBA title. I never thought the Suns team was really going anywhere. It's like you get Kevin Durant, that's cool, but like he's proven he's not the best player in a championship team, and you made the finals in kind of a weird year for the NBA where there's a lot of injuries. You face the Clippers with Kawhi Leonard injured, so they kind of had half their stars there, and then you get Kevin Durant. It's like it just never really felt like it was going to work. It was weird that he went to Brooklyn, and it's kind of just sad at the end of the day seeing the end of Kevin Durant's career because he was at a point where he's better than Steph Curry and he saved his career to wait a minute, Steph Curry won before and after you. So now you're not even maybe a top 4 player in your generation anymore, where you go, the Nets don't do anything, and then you kind of just waste the rest of your career with the Suns in a very Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers esque type of way.
Yeah, Kevin Durant's career, if I had to compare it, he kind of reminds me of how Shaq ended his career. Because if you look at Shaq, right, he's successful in Orlando. He joins the Lakers, pairs him with Kobe. They win multiple rings, breaks up because of chemistry, whether it be with Draymond in this case or with Kobe in the other instance. And then he joins the Heat. Unlike with Brooklyn, Shaq had success, but also a short-lived era with Miami, short stint with Brooklyn. They both end up on the Suns, and it just feels like with Kevin Durant, like Kevin Durant is going to be 37 very soon, and it just feels like his career is slowly dwindling down. The further along we get from Golden State, the more we realize how much he was a fool to leave Golden State, where what they could have had 3, 4 rings ultimately finishing with. He has his titles. He'll be solidified in history. He'll probably finish as a top 15 player of all time. But this guy just hit 30,000 points all time, and he's not going to be a top 10 player when it's all said and done. His leave to Brooklyn was one of the worst decisions in NBA history, and then going to Phoenix was even more confusing. I just fear that he's going to ultimately dwindle out of relevancy with the NBA because it feels like he's already there. And I don't know who else is going to want him at this point with all the bridges he's burned.
Yeah, and I feel like, Golden State wanted him to come back, so maybe he can mend that bridge in the offseason and you can go out there with Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green and see if that works for you. And then Kevin Durant at that point is like your 2B. Steph Curry's your number one option. Jimmy Butler's your 2A. Kevin Durant's your 2B here. And then you have Durant, you have Draymond, Jimmy Butler, Gary Payton, playing defense, and then you have Steph and Kevin Durant just filling it up. Like it could work, and I feel like that would be the best situation where maybe like Shaq didn't ever go back to the Lakers and he regretted not being able to win more rings with them. Maybe Kevin Durant goes back to Golden State and decides to win a few more rings with them.
I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't mind him going back. I don't think he should have ever left Golden State. I get leaving eventually, but I just think that it's gone down as one of the worst decisions. And I think for Shaq, I think he would also admit that he regrets leaving the Lakers, even though he found success with Miami, being the two for Dwayne Wade. He just continued to just eventually just dwindle out of relevancy after that. So we'll see how it pans out for him. I hope he ends up leaving Phoenix though, because I think it'd be best for both of them.
I just see him in a Kings jersey, to be honest, though.
That'd be sad. I just don't see him how he's gonna like. Where else is he gonna go? Is he gonna go to the Mavericks now? Is he gonna go to like? I don't see where he can go. Where because wherever he goes, he needs to be the star. And I just don't see with his age, with how his injuries have been. Like, I just don't know who's gonna want him at this point. At least for
Philly.
the price that it's gonna cost. Philly,
Philly
yeah,
loves
Philly,
old injured stars. I can't believe they get Paul George 200 million.
yeah. Wow, that was a mistake.
I mean, good
Yeah,
for him though.
that's Philly. Yeah, I mean, one last bag, right? Good for him. Just like Kirk Cousins. But that's the NBA and where it is right now. The uh, NBA, as we mentioned here, the All Star game. Who will be the face of the league? These are questions that will be answered over the course of time. Um, so yeah, we talked about the NFL offseason. We talked about the cap situations, rumors around there, the NFL, the NBA as well. Now we want to start a new segment here where we talk about at least like what we've been watching the last couple of weeks. This is something that we'll be updating and doing weekly here. Is there anything that you want to shout out from what you've been watching or consuming over the last week that we've been gone?
Yeah, we've been rewatching Breaking Bad right now, and this is my third time watching Breaking Bad through. And honestly, each time I watch it, I always feel like my memory of the show kind of cuts off where Gus Fring dies in season 4, where that's such a big moment on the show. It's such like a shocker that that's kind of really the most memorable moment of the show. And when we rewatch the fifth season, obviously you have the famous scene where Hank grabs the book and he realizes that Walter White is actually the person he's been chasing all of these years, who ended up getting him shot in the parking lot, and why he had to go through rehab. You have that iconic scene, but like the rest of season 5 is kind of blurry for me. Like I really don't remember like how the last season unfolded as much as I do like what happened earlier in the season. And like you kind of see in this show where he goes in season 1, and then suddenly in season 4 they're like only a year has gone by, but Walt looks like a completely different person than he did in the first season.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. Honestly, when I think about season 5, I think about him going up to New Hampshire, hiding away, and then I think about how his relationship with Jesse continues to deteriorate, where ultimately Jesse just hates the guy. And honestly, I feel like the ending for the show, I don't know if you guys have gotten to the ending yet, but I feel like there was more to be desired there. I know they've talked about like a Breaking Bad movie that would have been a good fit for them, but um, yeah, I feel like yeah, season 5 is kind of forgettable. If you forget it, if you move out of the Hank timeline, everything that happens from there, like what exactly, how everything kind of formulates, it's interesting to see. Have you guys, what season are you on at this point?
We're on season 5, like episode 11 right now, so we're almost done it. And like the
5.
thing with this show too is like I feel like every single character is unlikable outside of Jesse in the show.
Yeah.
Like I feel like
Yeah.
Jesse's really the only redeeming character, where at the end of the show Skylar is like unwatchable and like uncomfortable anytime she's on screen in Breaking Bad. And then at the end of season 5, suddenly she's like, well, if we don't stay quiet, then the money is gonna leave. And then suddenly Walt realizes like, oh, it was all worth it. She wants my money. And then Skylar is put in a situation where she's like, I kind of like the idea of having all of this money, so if he goes and dies and they're never able to prosecute him, I'll be able to keep all of this money because it's going to be hidden, and then we'll be set. And you kind of just see that moment where her character like flips and like buys into what Walt was pursuing the whole time, where she doesn't like it at first, but you see her character come full circle in the fifth season, where she's like, "Well, I don't want to lose all of this money, though."
Yeah, I think it's genius how he ends up flipping it on the old business partners that they had and making it so basically all that money is clean. Um, I think that yeah, honestly, the ending was pretty eventful. I'm interested to see what your thoughts are with the last 5 episodes and how it all shakes out. But I like what the how Breaking Bad's been. This is the third time you've watched it at this point. Have you watched
Yeah,
like a
it's the
Better Call
third time.
Saul or anything like that?
Yeah, Better Call Saul, I've started twice, but I never got around to finish it. Anytime I think of Better Call Saul, I just think of Cinnabon.
Yeah, I haven't. I've only seen season one, and I've never gotten into it. It's one of those things where I feel like I need to watch Breaking Bad and then watch Better Call Saul. But it feels like just like with Breaking Bad, like the first 2 seasons are just really slow, and so getting into it can be kind of hard, especially when you have limited time to watch stuff.
Yeah, definitely. But I've been watching Breaking Bad over the past few weeks. Been interesting. Kind of rewatching that, noticing the different things you pick up with that show. But what have you been watching? What's on your mind for this week?
Yeah, I've been watching Peaky Blinders. There's a girl I've been seeing that we've been watching. Um, Getting into that show. So I'm on season two. Peaky Blinders is a show that I've been meaning to watch for a long time now, and I finally did. I've always loved Cillian Murphy, and they have another great, a bunch of great cast members there. I would say that my first impression of the show is that the first season is definitely more of a slow burn, where I think it ultimately takes till like episode 5 of 6, where you're finally like, oh, okay, what happens next? But now that I'm in season two, it's fascinating how they're building up the Shelby family. The villain in this show is like basically like a police lieutenant. His name Major Campbell, and he is just disgusting, gross, maleficent, like just terrible. And unfortunately, I've already spoiled it for myself because I looked too soon. I looked at their IMDb. I know that he dies at some point, and I'm excited for when he dies because I hope he gets absolutely brutally murdered by a pack of wild pigs for all I care. Like the villains, I will say the villains in Peaky Blinders are just grimy, corrupt, slimy, typically either politicians or police department people. And it just talks about like underground crime in England. Um, so, I mean, it's definitely worth a good watch. I haven't finished the show, but it's continuously heated up, and I've really liked watching it so far. And if you like Cillian Murphy, especially, then I think you'll love this show.
Is Tom Hardy's character in it yet, or is he yet to show up?
No, I didn't know Tom Hardy got into the show. That's sick.
But as yeah, I've gotten into that show, and I kind of thought it was slow at first, and it like never really hooked me to the point where I was like, I need to finish this. So it's kind of just one of those things I never got around to. But would you say it's worth it for someone who's kind of a fan of like kind of period piece shows? Like, does it set like a good environment where you feel like you're in that time period? Because for me, it just felt a little bit glossy when I watched it the first time.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a little UK at some points. But I do think that it does encapsulate like that time well. I believe it's set in like the 1800s. So I think they do a good job of it. Whether it's authentic to the time, I'm not sure, but I think that if my biggest complaint with the show would probably be like the accents get kind of old after a while. I don't think everyone's accent in the show is great either. Um, I think that's probably my biggest complaint. Like especially not Cillian Murphy's character, but his brother's character has a really obnoxiously bad Irish accent, and I feel like that sometimes takes me out of it. Um, and then like the love interest, just there's no chemistry there. Like he has a love interest with I forget the name of the character, but season one's love interest, and she's just very stale as an actress. I don't know what her name is. I'll try to look her up, but not very impressed with her just character as a whole. Luckily, she's left the show, but I think that's probably my biggest gripes with the show so far. But overall, I think the show's great, and I would recommend it. We'll keep it posted. I'll see. I'm gonna try to finish season two this week, hopefully.
Yeah, it's interesting because they're talking about making a movie for Peaky Blinders, and they're like, yeah, that's not going to be the last of the Shelby family yet either. So I'm like, how far are they taking this? Like, how many seasons are there right now? Like, how many episodes are in each season?
Each season 6 episodes, and I believe there's 6 seasons.
Oh, it's only 6 episodes.
Yeah, that's why I got into it because I'm somebody who sucks with watching TV shows. I've been trying to finish Ozarks for 2 years now. I got through season 1, and then season 2 happened. I watched the first episode, and that's it. Even though I liked season 1, even though I liked the intro, I'm
Yeah,
just unfortunately just that kind of guy with TV shows.
yeah. No, season 3 and 4 of Ozarks are like right there. I'm gonna after I finish Breaking Bad, I'm gonna watch Ozarks after because one thing I give Ozarks over Breaking Bad is the supporting characters are just way better, way more interesting, and way more watchable. Like I'll take Wendy over Skylar any day out of the week. And then also, I'll take Jonah over Walt Jr. Like Jonah, who's out here killing deer, learning how to hunt, and like be like a man of the land, and kind of just like a sociopath over Walt Jr., who's just like,
Terrible.
let me eat breakfast. And then you have Hank and Marie, who are both also kind of annoying, where you have like Ruth in Breaking Bad, who's a really interesting side character. You have some real interesting aspects of just like white trash culture. Like, I feel like that, and then along with the cartel villains, like season 3 and 4 are right up there with me for Breaking Bad. So I'm interested in comparing them back to back because I feel like
Mm,
Ozarks has better side characters. You just don't necessarily have like a Walter White and Jesse type of relationship. It's more about the
mm.
marriage.
Yeah, yeah. I'm interested to see. I gotta finish that show, but you'll have to keep me updated with if you decide to rewatch that. But this is a new segment with the what are we watching lately. Wanted to finish the show with that, but we went over the NFL offseason preview, at least what to expect moving forward these next few months without football. Talked about the NBA All Star game and the disaster that was the face of the league. So make sure to check back in next week as we go through everything. We got a lot of news coming out down the pipeline within the next few months. You won't miss it here. And then to end the message, always, 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 always stay brick.
Staver.
Lovely.
That's fun. I like doing the salary caps.